Allan, I'm excited to talk with you today. We possibly met about 10 years ago. So I was playing basketball at Stanford at Arriaga, and I reached for a loose ball, and two guys like intersected on my arm. And
Wow.
I knew right away that it was bad. So I looked down at my arm and my elbow is dislocated. It's completely out of socket. So I run over to my friend and have him try to pull on it, pop it back in. He can't get it back in. Some more people try, they can't get it back in. Obviously it hurts, but I've got some adrenaline. Um, and then they say, hey, there's actually an orthopedic like office downstairs, and there's a convention down there. So the team docs for the San Francisco 49ers in Stanford are there right now. So why don't you go down there? So anyway, in Arriaga, in the building I was at,
Wow.
there happened to be I don't know how many orthopedists there. I go down and they treat me for my dislocated elbow. So whether you were there or not, I'm grateful for people like you who take care of our joints.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure it was me, but maybe one of my colleagues, and I hope your elbow's okay now.
Yeah, every time, if I shoot and I snap my elbow real hard, I can still feel the pain, but it's doing great for the most part. So even though you're an orthopedic surgeon and an adjunct professor, you've shifted your focus a bit these last 6 years to try to improve people's vitality. And as I've aged, I've recently, crossed 40. I can feel and see my body aging. I've been thinking about health and vitality and thriving more. And I also have 4 kids. And so I'm also trying to do all I can to help them thrive in every aspect of their life. So with that in mind, Allan, as you think back on your career, are there 2 or 3 simple, practical, underappreciated lessons you've learned that you'd most like to pass along to future generations?
Yeah, Nate, it's really an opportunity that I appreciate to be here today. And what I'd like to share, if I could, like 3 lessons and 3 stories to help answer your question. Is that all right?
Yeah, that's great.
So the first one is a little hard to tell, but it's important. And that is about a year ago, August 2021, I had to go back to Michigan. I've been in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley for about 20, 25 years now. But a close family member passed away suddenly, and it wasn't expected. Unfortunately, she was found dead in her apartment after 2 days. She lived alone. And I took a plane ride. And again, this is in the middle of the pandemic here. So it was difficult to fly from San Francisco to Detroit. There were no cars to rent. And my family was all, tied up with the funeral arrangements. So I had to take a bus from Detroit Metro. I had to go through Ann Arbor. I went to the University of Michigan. So that was one mild bright spot. And to Lansing, Michigan, where I'm from. So it was a kind of a long journey. And on the way out there, I was in frenetic Silicon Valley mode, just thinking about all the stuff in my world that wasn't going right, all the deadlines I hadn't met. And then I scrambled to get to this funeral. And Nate, when I got to the funeral, I looked at this oak tree about 10 feet away from a fresh grave. And there was this blue-handled shovel next to the grave. And it's even now, it still kind of stuns me to think about it. I pulled out my camera. I took a picture of the shovel next to the grave. And it was like the shovel was screaming at me. The shovel was screaming at me, you do not know when I'm going to come for you. So we went to the funeral. It was terrible and awesome, and for a couple of days, and it was terrible, obviously, for the loss of life and a great soul that was a beautiful person inside and out. And it was great because I got to connect with friends and family I hadn't seen in a long time. And then on the plane ride back, I started thinking about everything that's right in my life. Not all the deadlines I missed, not all the challenges, but all the people and all the things that were amazing in my life. And so that little story of the shovel next to the grave helped me cement in my mind this concept that I teach through my Vitality Explorers courses that I teach at Stanford through Stanford Continuing Studies, is to think with time in mind. Now, again, I'm somebody who teaches this, but I had to remember that every second counts. I had to remember that it's important to pause and reflect, not just on what's wrong, which we do all the time, but what's right in your life, and kind of even catalog that. So we know that gratitude helps, but writing it down, saying thank you, being appreciative for the people and the opportunities that you have that are going well in your life. And it also helped me cement this concept of what I call the 1,000,000-second challenge. And if every second counts, I started thinking about how am I wasting seconds? And I think we have life leaks in our world. And that could be doom scrolling on your phone, that could be complaining or gossiping. But I came up with this idea that I'm wasting 1,000 seconds a day, which is about 17 minutes. And so for leaders out there, when you're saying, okay, I don't have time to do anything, I'm super busy, I'll still challenge you to think that something in your life is, you're not doing something where you can save 17 minutes. And if you start to apply that, just 1,000 seconds a day, 17 minutes, for 12 straight days, which is 1,000,000 seconds. I'm a little bit of a math geek here. What could you do in the next 1,000,000 seconds? So that shovel next to the grave really helped me complete this loop of thinking with time in mind. And that kind of leads me to my second story, which is something I don't love to share. And I'm sure your audience has some issues or concerns with their own potential, either athletic or academic ability. But I want to take you back to my 6th grade spelling bee. Okay. So I don't know what your 6th grade self was like me, but I was awkward and oddly, overconfident. It was a weird combination. Okay. So my 6th grade teacher, I was the very first person, this is cemented, just burned into my brain. I was the first person up for the 6th grade spelling bee. Okay. And the word is tube. Okay. And so I'm thinking about this, and a little added thing here is when I was in elementary school, they made up a accelerated math class for me. I was ahead of everybody in math, but I was also in remedial reading. So I got sort of the bipolar experience of being with accelerated people and with remedial people. Yeah. So tubes, this is round 1 of the 6th grade spelling bee. And again, I'm awkward but confident. And I say TOOB. And my teacher goes, oh. And my reading ability for her was, her face was like, oh. She goes, would you like to try again? And I thought she was just kind of poking me to see if I was confident. So I said it again, TOOB. And of course, the entire class starts laughing at me. And I'm the first one up and the first one out in the 6th grade spelling bee. And that really affected me. Okay. I got teased. I'd never learned phonics in early on. I tried to confabulate about reading and writing for most of my middle school and high school, and even into college. And I never could learn how to spell well. So 5 years ago, almost exactly 5 years ago, here's the lesson I learned from that story for leaders out there. Turn a weakness into a strength. So I have been lauded for my math and analytical ability for my entire academic career, but I've been laughed at for my English ability. So I said, okay, I'm going to start writing. And okay, a writer, I'm going to turn myself into a writer. I said, I want to write a book about how to be vital. And so I knew that would be a daunting task. And so I committed myself to write every single day. And if I make it to October 17th, 2022, I will have written every single day for 5 years. That's through spine surgery. That's through funerals. That's through travel. Every single day I have written. And it's become sacrosanct for me. I get up early in the morning and I write. I have now published what I call the Vitality Explorer coursebook, which is something you can find on Amazon. It's a required textbook for my Stanford class. I've written over 200 Vitality info snacks, which I've put up on my Vitality Explorer Substack site. And here's what I learned again, is I am not a great writer, but I'm now functional, okay? Yeah. And I turned a weakness into maybe not a big strength, but I turned it into something that has really important for leaders out there. If you think about something, it's, you may have a lot of strategic thinkers out there. It's really valuable, but if you have to write it down, and I know you're a lawyer and you're a professor and you're probably an expert, and I'm kind of interested how you're going to comment on this, but the thought is writing it down requires you to be coherent in your thinking. Yeah. And then if you can think about something and if you can write about something, then you can teach something. And that's what I do now is I teach my students to think, write, and then do. And that leads me to the final little story I'd like to tell you. And this is about a fraternity brother of mine at Michigan. And by the way, he got his MBA at Kansas. And I got his permission this morning to tell this story, but he is a brilliant guy. He's been a turnaround CEO. He's now president of a franchising organization in Ann Arbor. And this story is about when my friend was working with a company called Ecolab. And Ecolab sells a variety of different things, including soap and linens to hospitals. And his job at that time, he was working there, was to try to increase the sales or increase the viability of this division of Ecolab that was selling soap and linens. And the sales force was pretty down in the dumps. And the CEO and the CFO were like, look, you need to increase the sales. You need to jazz up the sales team. So he decided he would do a little mini retreat over a weekend, try to learn as much about the whole situation. And it became pretty clear that the sales force hated selling soap and linens. Okay, so when you're out in a bar and somebody says, what do you do? Well, I sell soap and bed sheets to hospitals. And then he dug into the details and he realized that something called nosocomial infections, which are infections that happen in the hospital, can kill literally thousands or tens of thousands of people per year. And that Ecolab had the best data on their soap and linens. So he told the sales force, we're going to do something simple. When anybody asks you what you do, you don't sell soap, you don't sell sheets, you save lives. And the next quarter, their sales leaped up by 20%. They didn't change their product. They didn't change their sales force. They changed the purpose of the organization. So the lesson I learned from my friend Dave, and this is what I call pinpointing your peak purpose. And that can be for you personally, or that can be for you, your professional or your organization. Now, this is a daunting task. My friend Dave is a genius about it for organizations. I've been teaching people now for 5 years about how to identify their personal peak purpose. And I'm going to share with you and your audience how I've reduced mine to enhance global vitality one person at a time. And Nate, when I first started, I was like, okay, I want to just boil the ocean. I'm going to be enhancing global vitality. And the final little caveat about that is during the pandemic, Stanford asked me to do a webinar about how to enhance vitality, and people were kind of stuck in their house. And it turned out to be one of the best attended webinars they had of the entire 2 years. They had 1,400 people sign up for this webinar. And then I got an email. By the way, I was really excited to do that. It went very, very well. And about a week later, I got an email from the chemistry department at Stanford. And they're like, oh my God, we missed the memo. We heard you did a really good job. Would you do one for the Stanford chemistry department? And I'm like, sure. And then the person who was on the other end said, well, we only have about 30 people. And I said, that's fine. It's fine. And 7 people showed up, okay, for the webinar. And I kind of did the same thing. It was not a lot of work to do because I'd already done it. But all 7 of them had, contacted me later and said, wow, that made a big difference for me. And that's when I realized that if, what I'm doing with you here today, Nate, or your audience, if I can reach just one person and help them think with time in mind about that shovel, help them maybe turn a weakness into a strength, or help them pinpoint their purpose for their organization or personally, then I will have done my job. So that's my 3 stories and my 3 lessons. And as a professor yourself, I'd like to hear what you think about that and if that's meaningful for leaders.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so much to say about this. I love the imagery of the shovel. Death is coming for us. Even when I think about aging, I think aging is that's death, right? I mean, that's this like slow fuse that's burning and my body's expiring. And I'm trying to, of course, you tell people, take advantage of every day and live life to the fullest. But that image of the shovel, I think really helps cement this idea. Like, it's tangible. And it motivates me to actually kind of do that trite phrase of, take advantage of every moment. One thing I have is a spreadsheet with boxes that automatically gets filled in every month for every month I live. And then, so it's got a bunch of gray boxes for the months I've lived, and it's got some empty boxes for my life expectancy for, months I hope to have left. So I'm going to combine kind of that box or that spreadsheet with this shovel metaphor to help me and my students and my kids hopefully think about long term. One of the phrases that I heard that I love is all self-help can essentially be boiled down to think long term. And so just thinking about, with the end in mind, what are we doing with our time? This was it the 1,000,000-second challenge? Great framing for how to make these lessons tangible. And then you share that second lesson about the spelling bee, and you got to the point where you misspell the word, and I laughed because I still remember misspelling poisonous, Poisonous, in my sixth or seventh or fifth, whatever grade spelling bee that was. And it's such a small thing, but at the time, it feels so monumental. And in the leadership class that I teach, we spend the first about kind of 4 weeks, 3 weeks, really focusing on the mindset of a leader and how you view challenges. Do you view them as a learning challenge? Do you believe you have, control over events that happen to you in your life? So they call this internal or external locus of control. We talk about fixed versus growth mindset. And so much is about adopting this mindset of, turn your weakness into your strength. Practice being a good leader, get the skills of a leader, and have that mindset of, I can get better and I can improve. So cool to hear that at your age, Allan, you're still like taking this lesson you learned from the time you were a child. And now it's like, why do I have to live with this, this stress I've had for all these years of not being a good writer? Like, I'll just be a better writer by practicing. So cool to hear that. And then finally, of course, you said pinpointing purpose. There was one more P in there.
Yep. So you can pinpoint your purpose, or you can pinpoint your peak purpose. I'm going to put a little comma in that there, because I'd like to explore for maybe a minute. I know we're running out of time here, but there's a gap between whatever your purpose is, which, by the way, if you don't know your purpose, it's just reflective of how you spend your time and energy. Just think how much time and energy you spend on something, and that is really your purpose. But your peak purpose, the difference between your purpose and your peak purpose, is what I call your vitality gap. Now, if you're executing at your peak purpose for as long as you can, you're going to have a very small vitality gap. And if you're up there doing what you are meant to do, and by the way, this is kind of stolen from Steve Jobs and his Stanford commencement address, I think it was 2016, is that if you don't know what you're supposed to do, you got to keep searching and don't settle. And then when you find it, much like love, to paraphrase Steve Jobs, you will know it. And so that I've been very lucky to find one of my peak purposes in life is to help enhance vitality as much as I can. And Nate, it's been a joy to kind of discuss this with you. And I'd love to learn more about how you teach that with your leaders in your class. And it's been great to get to know you and other people through the Campbell Trophy Summit and other times where we've interacted.
Yeah, well, it's so great for me to hear, because I've had a number of careers. And one of my careers was, I didn't even tell you this, I was a medical device rep working with orthopedic surgeons. So I was, I worked for Zimmer, and I was doing the total knees and total hip replacements for a year. And then I was in real estate, and I did some tech stuff, and I went to law school and I got a PhD. And ultimately I settled on being a professor. And I finally, at age 40, I get my first tenure track job. And one of my purposes, and I don't know if it's my peak purpose, but it's certainly up there, is just learning and sharing the things I learn. And so to have the opportunity to talk with you, people like you, and learn these interesting ideas, this is exactly what I'm trying to do with my time. You've been traveling the world, sharing these ideas. I love the concepts you've shared today, and would love to, continue the dialogue, and just really appreciate you coming on today, Allan.
Thank you so much, Nate, and love to connect with anybody out there who's listening, and look forward to future interactions with you and your students.
Great. Thank you.